The Voice of Thunder, David Coverdale. Full biography and untold life story. A voice that ignited generations. There are singers who entertain, and then there are singers who ignite. Voices are more than just sound. Voices have become fire, thunder, and the soundtrack of generations. Among them stands David Coverdale, a man whose journey from the quiet streets of Yorkshire to the roaring stages of the world is nothing short of legendary. To some, he is a golden-haired frontman of Whitesnake, the voice behind anthems like Here I Go Again and Is This Love. To others, he is a man who once stepped into the shoes of Ian Gillan in Deep Purple, defying the odds and carving his own chapter in rock history. But behind the soaring vocals, the wild stage presence, and the glamorous spotlight lies the story of a man who battled insecurities, reinvented himself, and built a career that still commands respect decades later. This is the full, untold life story of David Coverdale. From Yorkshire roots to rising dreams. David Coverdale was born on September 22, 1951, in Saltburn-by-the-Sea, a coastal town in North Yorkshire, England. The son of a working-class family, young David grew up surrounded by the gritty reality of post-war Britain. His childhood was unremarkable to those around him, but inside, a fire was already smoldering. He was a shy, soft-spoken boy, but when he opened his mouth to sing, people noticed. His voice had a texture, deep, smoky, and emotional, that felt far older than his years. He spent his days wandering the seaside town, dreaming of something bigger, and his nights listening to blues and early rock and roll records, trying to imitate the sounds of Otis Redding, Muddy Waters, and Little Richard. He was intoxicated by their raw energy. These voices gave him courage, a sense of belonging, and an escape from the small-town life that often felt too confining. Shaping the soul of a singer. Before the fame, before the roaring crowds, David Coverdale was just another struggling musician trying to find his way. In his teenage years, he sang with local bands in pubs and working men's clubs, sharpening his craft night after night. The smoke-filled rooms, the clinking of pint glasses, the rough voices of factory workers. It was in these places that he learned how to own a stage, even when the audience barely listened. He was not born a natural rock star. He was forged by grit and persistence. Every gig was a lesson: how to project, how to connect, how to command respect with nothing but a microphone. By the early 1970s, Coverdale was fronting a band called The Government and later Fabulosa Brothers. Though these bands never achieved fame, they were the training ground where David Coverdale developed his unmistakable sound, bluesy, powerful, and dripping with soul. Stepping into the purple spotlight. In 1973, fate knocked on David Coverdale's door in the most extraordinary way. Deep Purple, one of the biggest rock bands in the world, had just lost their vocalist Ian Gillan. The search for a replacement led them to an unlikely candidate, a relatively unknown singer from Yorkshire. When Coverdale auditioned, he was terrified. Standing in front of Ritchie Blackmore, John Lord, and Ian Pace, he felt like an imposter. Yet when he opened his mouth to sing, everything changed. His voice filled the room with a depth and richness that even the hardened members of Deep Purple couldn't ignore. They had found their man. His debut with the band came with the album Burn in 1974. The record was a triumph. Coverdale's bluesy tone and soulful delivery gave the band a fresh energy, and tracks like the title song Burn became instant classics. He followed it with Stormbringer later that same year, further solidifying his role. But being in Deep Purple was never easy. Ritchie Blackmore's mercurial personality and constant internal tensions made the atmosphere volatile. Coverdale often felt like an outsider among rock royalty. Yet he persevered, determined to prove he belonged. Forging his own destiny. Whitesnake. By 1976, Deep Purple had crumbled under its own weight, and Coverdale was left at a crossroads. Many thought a career would fade with the band, but instead, he forged his own path. In 1978, he formed Whitesnake, a band that would become synonymous with his name and forever alter the course of rock history. Whitesnake was Coverdale's vision come alive, a blend of hard rock power, bluesy grit, and sultry swagger. Early albums like Trouble and Love Hunter established him as a force in the UK rock scene, but it was the 1980s that would catapult them into superstardom. Coverdale's leadership style was both inspiring and demanding. He surrounded himself with world-class musicians, but always kept the focus on the soul of the music. Whitesnake's revolving lineup may have changed faces, but the band's essence, Coverdale's voice, charisma, and vision, remained constant. The soundtrack of the 80s glory days. The mid-1980s saw Whitesnake climb to heights few could have imagined. Their self-titled 1987 album became a global phenomenon, powered by massive hits like Here I Go Again and Is This Love. Coverdale's voice was irresistible, gravelly yet smooth, powerful yet tender. MTV played their videos endlessly, with Tawny Kitaen's iconic car top dance forever etched into rock history. But more than the visuals, it was the sound, Coverdale's soaring delivery and the band's anthemic riffs, that captured the world. For a moment, Whitesnake wasn't just a band. They were the very definition of rock and roll glamour. Yet fame came with its shadows. The constant touring, the demand for perfection, and the pressure to stay at the top weighed heavily on Coverdale. He was no longer just a singer. He was a symbol, an idol, a brand. The boy from Saltburn had become a global rock god, but at times, he wondered if the price was too high. When the spotlight dimmed, the 1990s brought new challenges. The grunge revolution swept through the music industry, pushing many classic rock bands into the background. Whitesnake, once kings of the charts, suddenly seemed like relics of another era. Record labels shifted focus, and fans chased new sounds. For Coverdale, it was a bitter pill to swallow, but he refused to fade quietly. In 1993, he teamed up with Jimmy Page of Led Zeppelin for the Coverdale Page Project. Their collaboration was explosive, proving that Coverdale's voice could still hold its own alongside the legends. Songs like Shake My Tree reignited interest and reminded the world of his immense talent. Though the project was short-lived, it was enough to breathe new life into his career. By the late 1990s and into the 2000s, Coverdale resurrected Whitesnake, leading them into a new era of tours and albums. Fans from the old days returned, and new generations discovered the band's music for the first time. The man behind the rock god. Behind the leather jackets, the stage lights, and the soaring vocals was a man of surprising humility. David Coverdale never forgot his roots, nor the shy boy from Saltburn who once doubted his own worth. He spoke often about his insecurities, his search for identity, and the constant balancing act between personal life and the demands of fame. His marriage to actress Tawny Kitaen brought him into the tabloid spotlight, but like much of his private life, it was marked by turbulence. Coverdale guarded his personal space fiercely, choosing to let the music remain his loudest voice. Those close to him describe him as warm, generous, and fiercely dedicated to his art. Fans didn't just hear Coverdale sing. They felt him. They felt the ache, the joy, the struggle, and the triumph in every lyric. A legacy written in thunder. Today, David Coverdale stands as one of rock's most enduring frontmen. From Deep Purple to Whitesnake, from smoky bars to stadium stages, his journey has been nothing short of extraordinary. His story is more than just chart-topping hits or platinum records. It is about resilience, about reinvention, about refusing to be defined by the rise and fall of trends. He carried the weight of expectation, weathered the storms of changing times, and yet his voice remains as electrifying as ever. Even now, in his 70s, Coverdale continues to perform, proving that age cannot dull the flame of true passion. His concerts are not just shows. They are celebrations of survival, perseverance, and the enduring power of rock and roll. The untold story of a survivor. David Coverdale's life is a symphony of highs and lows, of struggles and triumphs, of vulnerability and power. From Yorkshire's quiet corners to rock's loudest stages, he carved a path that was uniquely his own. His voice remains etched into rock history, not just a sound, but as an emotion, a memory, a force. This is David Coverdale, the man, the myth, the voice, the untold story of one of rock's greatest icons.